Welcome back. Peace talks between Russia and Ukraine yesterday ending without a ceasefire. Though both sides did agree to more prisoner exchanges, Russia reportedly telling Ukraine it would only end the war if Kyiv gives up huge pieces of territory, withdraws fully from 4 Russian-occupied territories, rules out any membership to NATO, and accepts limits on the size of its army. Ukraine repeatedly rejecting Russia's conditions, saying it is equal to surrendering. All of this happening after Ukraine's weekend drone strike on Russia, targeting 5 air bases and destroying more than 40 warplanes, occurred. Joining me now is Fox News' senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane. General, great to have you this morning. As always, this sounds just impossible to end with those requirements that Russia is putting on Ukraine. What is your assessment?
Yeah, well, maybe Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's senior security official and obviously a very close ally of Vladimir Putin, said it best. He said the Istanbul talks, which just took place yesterday, is not about a compromise for peace. What it's really about is ensuring a swift victory for Russia. And I think that's really where Russia is coming from here. They are stalling in terms of unwillingness to make any concessions because they still see a victory in the front window here. They see an opportunity, and they're continuing to move in that direction. So where are we, and what should the United States do? Listen, we all knew that this was going to be hard. President Trump certainly knew that going into this. Nothing going to be easy. Even if both sides want to end the war, and one side here clearly does not, because they still think they can achieve victory, it would still be hard. But I think what we've got to look at is what has worked. President Trump leveraged Ukraine because they wanted to have security guarantees, and that was somewhat understandable from Zelensky's perspective, prior to going to a ceasefire. And the president leveraged him by pulling intelligence and also stopping military assistance. And Zelensky removed those conditions. And that was part of the peace process exhibited by the United States to leverage someone to change their behavior. We've got to do the same thing with Russia. It is part of the process. It's not outside the process. And that means we got to leverage him. And we don't know if that will actually work. Let's be honest about it. Yeah. But we do know what is not working. And just the diplomatic talking is not working. So the leverage has got to be, I think, number one, military assistance, and give them the robust air defense systems and the other things they desperately need. Why is that? Because once Putin sees that the United States is still committed to Ukraine, he knows he can't achieve victory. The evidence is already right in front of us. We're 39 months into the war, Maria. 39 long months. That's how much time it took for us to defeat Nazi Germany. And Putin has not succeeded. He hasn't even taken the entire Donbass region, which is what he wanted to take in 2014. So he cannot succeed if the United States is providing military assistance. He knows that for a fact. Second thing, let's issue the crippling sanctions. That is all part of the process. Let's leverage Putin just as we did Zelensky. We don't know, let's be frank, if it's going to work. But it certainly is worth a try at this point, because diplomatic talks are not getting us there.
I was just going to say that, you know, Lindsey Graham is talking about advancing this legislation for severe Russia sanctions. I mean, look, if the free world allows Russia to just, you know, set the terms here and say, you know, all of these requirements that I just listed that it said is necessary to end, what's to stop Xi Jinping from doing the same thing in Taiwan and wherever else he wants? Who's to stop North Korea from doing the same thing? Iran, you know, so the free world has to take a stand here in order to isolate Russia. Isn't that right? And you're right. I mean, Lindsey Graham took a trip to Kyiv over the weekend. He went with Richard Blumenthal. They co-sponsored the Senate sanctions measure, putting a 500% tariffs on any country that buys Moscow energy products. Wouldn't that send the right message to Vladimir Putin?
It will if you couple it with increased military aid. Putin pays more attention to what's happening on that battlefield because this is what's really happening here. He wants to achieve total military victory and collapse that regime and run that country himself through a stooge. But you also need the pressure of the sanctions. The thing you have to understand about Putin when it comes to sanctions, he's always been dismissive of them because he thinks he can work around them. I am not diminishing the importance of the sanctions. I think they're critical. But even more important is the military assistance. And you're absolutely right. We've got to draw a line here. And we've got to take a stand. There's no doubt about that. President Xi, if we cut and run, which is what Putin is after, he wants to wear down the president. President throws up his hands and says, I'm done here.
Yeah.
And cut and run. That's a victory for Putin. That's a victory for Xi. That also strengthens the Ayatollah's spine here in standing up to the United States. You're 100% correct about that. And what else happens as a result of that? Our allies are going to feel threatened as a result of it because our adversaries will be emboldened.
Yeah,
yes,
I mean,
now is the time to leverage it as part of the peace process. We're still in that peace process, and we've got to use the leverage the United States has.
And I wonder if that leverage includes, getting tough with Xi Jinping. I mean, we all know that China is behind Russia, and they're so supportive. The president is going to speak with Xi Jinping this week. I'd like to know if this comes up so that President Trump can pressure Xi Jinping to pressure Vladimir Putin. I mean, that's, the China relationship has empowered Putin. And by the way, it's also supporting Iran. I mean, President Trump reiterated that he's got a red line on Iran, saying that he will not allow enrichment of uranium nor a nuclear bomb under any new deal. The president posted on Truth Social, the autopen should have stopped Tehran a long time ago, enriching under our potential agreement. We will not allow any enrichment of uranium. And the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, also told Fox, President Trump has made it clear that Iran can never obtain a nuclear bomb. Special Envoy Witkoff has sent a detailed and acceptable proposal to the Iranian regime, and it's in their best interest to accept it, she said. But, General, what about that? I mean, is there some wiggle room that President Trump has to push China to get on the right side here and stop supporting these adversaries across the world? Would that help?
Well, certainly it would help significantly. China is the #1 supporter of Russia. They're financing the war by buying their oil at a discount. They provide so much to assist them in war materials. They don't provide a platform like a tank or a fighting vehicle, an artillery piece, but they provide all the components to help make that, to include the chemicals are necessary and the rare minerals. And then all the other things. To sustain a military on a battlefield, you need much more than weapons and ammunition. And they're providing significant assistance to them. So, yes, that's why these sanctions are very important, because there's secondary sanctions involved. When it comes to Iran, here's where I think we are. The Ayatollah has let his president, who obviously is a little bit more moderate than he is, to try to get involved in negotiations, to stall an eventual attack as much as possible so they can recover their air defense systems that the Israelis destroyed, primarily the S-300s. They are doing that as we speak. I think where the Ayatollah is, he's not going to let the United States dismantle his nuclear enterprise. In other words, the capability to make enriched uranium themselves, the centrifuges at these secret sites. We would have to be on those sites and watch that destruction ourselves. He's not going to let that happen. What is he willing to let happen? I think he's willing to let the strike happen because he thinks some part of that will survive and he will still be able to pursue a nuclear weapon even though there will be sanctions on him. That is where he is. And we've got to kind of understand what's really at stake with the Ayatollah. He is playing a very hardball game. He's not giving up on the idea of having a nuclear weapon. Why is he so obsessed about it?
Right.
It's pretty obvious. Once he has a nuclear weapon, he believes he has regime preservation, that no one's going to conduct a conventional attack on him to take his regime down if he has a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, but
that's what's behind all of this.
Who knows what he's going to do with that?
And he'll use it as a leverage against the Israelis.
Exactly. That's what I was just suggesting. General, it's great to see you. Thank you, sir. So a privilege to get your insights. Thank you, sir. General Jack Keane joining us.
Great talking to you, Maria.
Joining me now, the man who is running the investigation in Congress, Kentucky Congressman and House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer. Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for being here.
Good morning, Maria.
What can you tell us about your investigation? I know we spoke on Sunday and you said you gave Biden aides and his doctor, Dr. O'Connor, a choice: come forward voluntarily or face a subpoena. Have you heard back?
I have, and I'm very pleased to announce that the discussions are going extremely well. I fully expect the 4 staffers and I to announce a date any hour now as to when they're going to voluntarily come in and answer questions from the House Oversight Committee in a transcribed interview. We're going to communicate for the final time with Dr. O'Connor's attorneys this morning in a couple of hours. I fully expect him to comply along with the staffers. If he does not, he will receive a subpoena within a few hours. So I think the investigation's moving along rapidly, Maria. And I'm also here to say this morning that we're expanding the investigation. Obviously, there were more than those 4 staffers that were involved in the autopen. We're going to start bringing in additional staffers. They're going to be receiving communication from the Oversight Committee today, and we're going to be asking them to come in as well. We're going to bring in everybody that we think had anything to do with the decision-making process as to how these executive orders and pardons were signed using the autopen.
Okay, so it sounds like you're about to talk with a large group of former administration and campaign officials. You know, when you look at all of this, there were so many pardons and there were so many executive orders. I believe Joe Biden made like 160 executive orders over his 4-year term. How many of those are you questioning?
Well, we're questioning all the ones that were made in the last year. We're really focused on the ones made in the last 100 days. I've said this before. There was more activity out of the White House during the last 100 days than at any point in the previous 3.5 years of the Biden administration. This is at a time when you're talking about post-debate. The secret was out. Everyone knew Joe Biden wasn't at the top of his game at best, or in a complete state of mental invalidness at worst. He was spending the majority of his time in Delaware. He wasn't even in the White House. We know who was in the White House at the time. There were staffers and family members that spent a lot of time in the White House at that time. That's when all of the executive orders were signed using the autopen. So we want to know the process. We've identified, first of all, the staffers that actually were tasked with putting the documents in the autopen and pressing the power button. We want to know who gave them the authority to do that. We believe we know, but we're going to follow the trail. And again, Maria, I can't say how fast we're moving with the new information that's coming in, the new whistleblowers, the Tapper book, as well as people that have agreed to come in and voluntarily answer our questions.
Well, it's just extraordinary to me that so many people were encouraging him to run for president, including Dr. Jill Biden, the First Lady, telling him, run, keep going, keep going. And in fact, you believe they all knew about all of his cognitive issues? I mean, it was hard not to know. We all watched it. We talked about it on this program, of course. I mean, here's the conversation that I was having back in 2021. Watch this. We know that Biden is weak. We're not sure about his mental capacity. We know somebody else is running things, but the alternative is even worse. Kamala Harris. How is that presidential story going to look? One concern the Democrats have for Biden 2024 is his age and health. I mean, look, we all watch him. It doesn't bring anybody any joy to point out cognitive issues. I mean, this is back in 2021 and 2022, Congressman. And yet we're, supposed to be surprised that he wasn't doing well. It was all on display for everyone to see. So how did they do it, do you think? They were just running and shaping policy without his knowledge?
That's what a lot of people suspect. That's what the evidence that I've seen thus far would suggest. We're going to give these staffers due process. We're going to give Joe Biden due process. We're going to give the whole White House due process. We've notified them. They know they're coming in. Anyone who is involved in the White House is going to be asked to come in, whether that's high-level staffers, cabinet secretaries, or even family members. Whoever was involved in the process as we bring in these lower-level staffers and try to understand how so many documents ended up being signed with the autopen, and so much activity during the last 100 days at a time when Joe Biden was, by all accounts, checked out. And I'll say this, Maria, your history is going to be kind to you on all the criticism and observations you made of the Biden administration, because you've been right about everything, and I appreciate the great job you've done in getting the truth to the American people.
Thank you so much for that, Congressman. I remember I was at the inauguration on January 20th, and 20 minutes before President Trump was inaugurated, I looked at my phone. It was 20 minutes before he went and took the oath, and Joe Biden's pardoning people 20 minutes before. I thought, that's weird. It's January 20th. He's still doing pardons?
Pardoning his family, his immediate family, his entire family, while he's sitting on the stage. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Right.
And I think now the media has realized that protecting Joe Biden isn't in style anymore. And I think they've completely walked away, which is good for our investigation. We shouldn't face the same level of left-wing media weaponization as we faced during the Biden influence peddling investigation.
So what are the consequences of all of this, Mr. Chairman? I mean, when you look about all of the decisions made and how everything affected the American people, this sounds like a really big White House scandal. What would you assess should be the main consequences of this?
Well, first of all, the validity of the executive orders. Look, a lot of these executive orders, especially during the last 100 days, were meant to Trump-proof the next administration. They weren't shy about that. The staffers bragged about that. The left-wing media took that and ran and said, Joe Biden's going to be considered a great president. He's doing all this stuff at the end of his administration. And what they were saying was code word. We're trying to do everything we can to prevent Trump from achieving his legislative and executive goals as president. They were Trump-proofing it. That was a word the media used. Now, if these executive orders were just done and authorized by staff and Joe Biden's signature was forged on the autopen, as some would believe, then I think that the Trump administration is going to have a pretty good standing in court to get rid of a lot of these executive orders that are hindering his agenda in the first 6 months of his presidency.
Well, you know what gets me? All that time, the whole campaign, the Democrats kept saying President Trump is a detriment to democracy, is a threat to democracy and the Constitution. All the while, they're in fact threatening democracy.
Absolutely. You're 100% right.
Let me get your take on what's going on now. All we hear are the fighting words from the Democrats, your colleagues. Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has formalized her bid to lead the House Oversight Committee. She's pitching herself as your replacement. She claims it's a fresh face to take on the GOP majority, Mr. Chairman. No comment whatsoever about all the money that you have uncovered that Hunter Biden has received over the years. No comment on this cover-up of Joe Biden. She claims she's going to launch a Trump impeachment inquiry if she wins, and she wants your job. Your reaction?
Well, hopefully the Democrats won't ever see the majority again. I would hope that the Democrat conference would have more sense than to put someone like Jasmine Crockett in there. She doesn't care about waste, fraud, and abuse. She's been on the committee for 4 years, and she's never once raised a concern about excessive spending. Money grows on trees. It comes down like manna from heaven in the eyes of Democrat liberal members like Jasmine Crockett. So she just wants to be a chairman of the House Oversight Committee so she can harass and obstruct the Trump administration. I think the American people saw that, and that's why they voted for Trump. That's why they voted to keep a Republican majority in the House and to flip the Senate to Republican majority. Republicans are trying to govern. Governing sometimes is an ugly process, but we're trying to govern. We're trying to pass this big, beautiful bill. We're trying to save taxpayer dollars. All the Democrats want to do is attack Trump, and Jasmine Crockett's the poster child for that.
Well, it's a good point to bring up because the big, beautiful bill needs to pass for you all to have the success that you're looking for in the 2026 elections. But here you've got Elon Musk blasting the big, beautiful bill. You saw what he said. He called it a disgusting abomination. The words throwing fire into the Senate's plans just as they're trying to pass this by the July 4th holiday. Former Doge cost cutter sparking rebukes, obviously, from the House Speaker, Mike Johnson. He said he was disappointed by Musk. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent all pushed back. What are your thoughts here in terms of what's going on in the Senate? Do you expect this to pass before the end of July?
I do expect it to pass. I was communicating with Ted Cruz a few weeks ago. He's very optimistic. Ted Cruz is a consistent conservative. He's trying to do everything he can to make the bill better in the Senate, make it a better deal for the American taxpayers. I have confidence that Ted Cruz can do that. I want to support President Trump and his agenda. The big, beautiful bill is that. So it's disappointing that Elon Musk said what he said. It wasn't helpful, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to sway very much influence. We're focused on passing President Trump's agenda, and I'm confident there are enough senators that will pass that bill out of the Senate, and hopefully we can agree to the changes that they make in the Senate and get President Trump his first major legislative victory of his second term.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we're going to be watching your work as always. We so appreciate your time this morning, sir. Thank you.
Meanwhile, as the Trump administration works to cap Harvard's foreign enrollment, a new Wall Street Journal report outlines how much the university has become a training ground for CCP leadership, all on the American taxpayers' dime. The list goes on and on. You have a former vice president, a former vice premier, the country's current top trade negotiator. They have all passed through Harvard's elite programs. According to the report, they affectionately call it their, quote, party school, and not the party like the fraternity. It's raising serious questions about how much influence Beijing has gained inside our own institutions. Brian, I want to come to you because this is your alma mater. And I think my question to you is, are you as worried about this as some of us, the rest of us? And B, has it changed? Not to age you, you went there a few years ago. Is this a recent development? Is this a more concerted development? And then the third and final question, and I'll pose this to all of you guys as well, is typically the foreign students pay the full ride, which does allow then some people in the U.S. to go there on a scholarship. Does that begin to justify any of this? You're up.
Yes. So I went to Harvard for grad school, and in particular, I went to the business school and the Kennedy School.
Which is what they're talking about,
and this is
right?
what they say about the Kennedy School. If we were to rank the Chinese Communist Party's overseas party schools, again, like Communist Party schools, the one deserving top spot has to be Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. And now, they've been doing this a lot longer than, back further than when I was there, okay? But I did observe when I was there. I thought, you look around the classroom, and there are a lot of international students, and there are a lot of students from China. And I didn't know all their background, but it did strike me that this is a particularly international place. And when I would interact with those students, I mean, number one, they were very glad to be there. But number two, it felt to me like it was a huge networking puzzle they were trying to solve. Like, that's what they were there to do. And I decided the Harvard Kennedy School with all these, and they're mostly left-leaning people who are going to go into government. Okay, I was a rarity at that school. I just thought that seems kind of fishy to me. So now when I see this reporting about the kind of where these China students prefer to go, and I observe what I saw in terms of the relationships when I was there, it does make me very nervous. It seems very strategic, and it's not how to run a government budget. It's how to forge ties with people who will be in the bureaucracy in America and with whom you would want to have friendly ties if you want to have influence in America.
Adam, your thoughts?
Well, there are a couple of things going on here. One is that we here in the U.S. Educate the world, we supply the world, we keep NATO afloat, on and on and on. And I think it's another example of I don't know if I can say countries or people taking advantage of our generosity and our open arms policy, but there is an element of that as I'm trying to figure out my own view on whether these schools should be as accepting of non-U.S. students as they are. When I was at Princeton, I graduated class of '88, and it was mostly a group of Americans. In fact, it was mostly guys. I mean, we were 2/3 male at that point. And so Princeton has done a wonderful job at diversifying the student body, and that makes a student body stronger. But when I was just down a couple of weeks ago for reunions, I was stunned looking at the seniors, how many kids did not look American. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Yeah, I think it's something that we're all wrestling with as we're trying to figure out these issues, from imports to what is fair to what is not fair. I will say, and this is my final point, because I don't want to be a ball hog here on time, but I think that we need in this country to rethink how we allocate H-1B visas. Those are the visas that we award to very talented people who are highly educated. We limit that to $85,000 a year. So if we're educating all these people, if we're putting them on scholarships, and then we're not getting the benefit of their being here, then we lose. So again, I've laid out a bunch of different things there.
And Jackie, that sort of gets to the point where Marco Rubio seems to be tackling one issue when trying to clamp down on foreign students. But the president has also said very clearly that good graduates, we don't want the brain drain. Once you graduate, let's give you a visa to keep you here in the U.S. so that you can build and innovate and start a business here in America. And I think those might be two separate issues.
And I think that's what they're going after. When they talk about vetting these students and giving them student visas, they want to know who's coming into the country and what they're going to do here while they're here and what they're going to do after. Xi Jinping's daughter, who, by the way, went to Harvard under an alias, is not going to stay here and probably create a thriving business in the United States. And we have a reason to protect that interest. We were talking about reciprocity before. China's not going to allow people that they think are suspicious from the United States to come in and study there and sort of take intellectual property and bring it back to the mothership. And so they watch that kind of thing. I think this kind of goes hand in hand with what the administration is trying to do with the border, saying we need to know everybody that is coming into this country. We cannot just have these blanket policies where people come and go as they please. In some cases, they're inciting violence. And the final point that I'll make, you asked about, is all the money. They pay full freight, and that is why these schools want them there, and they turn a blind eye to it. And there's a huge problem with that. If you want to be a private institution and take money from these international students and bring them and whatnot, then don't take the federal funding, or vice versa. If you want the federal funding, then you've got to follow some rules.
Dagan, weigh in.
These aren't students. These are mid-career government officials, some of whom have direct connections to the Politburo in communist China or members of the Communist Party. And Harvard is courting them and has been for decades. And that quote you read about it being the #1 party school, that quote was actually from a online publication run by China, by Shanghai's main party newspaper.
That was the party admitting it.
It wasn't that wasn't some American newspaper who wrote that.
Yes.
But I want to get to, it's not just that, it's what else that China is doing. The House Select Committee on the Communist Party of China, the CCP, has found that Harvard has, this is what the subcommittee found, partnered with Shangjiang Production and Construction Corps. That is a Chinese paramilitary organization that has been sanctioned by the U.S. government for human rights abuses against the Uyghurs. Harvard hosted a training course on finance in collaboration with with the Chinese government. They also, Harvard, identified researchers at Harvard collaborated with 2 universities in China, both associated with China's military, on projects with potential military applications, including one involving a micro robot powered by soft artificial muscles, which could have dual use applications, commercial and military use in China, potentially against the United States. Also, Harvard utilized U.S. Department of Defense funding to support partnerships with Chinese scholars linked to the People's Liberation Army. So what is Harvard up to other than educating, training, and enriching the Communist Party of China and China as a whole, potentially with money and knowledge that what could be used to hurt the United States of America. That's what Harvard's doing.
Well said.
Not a day goes by, right? I mean, warnings and concerns about the housing market, they're mounting. Now, this morning in my inbox, Political called this situation a lose-lose. And, well, there have been even more sensational headlines like this one from the Daily Mail saying that realtors have hit the panic button. Now, some parts of the market, the housing markets, have already crashed, folks. I mean, second quarter of 2025, what they call the vacant property zombie report, 1.4 million residential properties. That's up big time, 1.3% of all U.S. homes. So they're vacant, right? They're zombies. 13 consecutive quarters. Well, this number has been around that level. So, you know, obviously people drive through these neighborhoods. You see them, you know what we're talking about. And then, of course, this morning, we learned that mortgage applications were down yet again, third week in a row. And this is refis and purchases. Now, part of the problem is that there are now a lot more sellers. Look at this chart. This is fascinating. A lot more sellers than buyers, all right? 1.9 sellers, 1.45 potential buyers. Now, my next guest has the best insight that I've seen on the street when it comes to these numbers and really the nuance of these numbers. I want to bring in now Resi Club co-founder, editor-in-chief, Lance Lambert. Lance, welcome to New York. Welcome back to New York.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about this overall problem. For me, this is the stat that stands out most, right? Let's bring that back before we go to Lance's chart, because the more sellers than buyers, obviously the tables have tilted. It's a so-called buyer's market, and yet it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, so what's occurred is that during the pandemic housing boom, there was so much demand that came in at once. Those ultra low rates, all the money that was printed, all the remote work, there wasn't enough supply in terms of units out there to meet that demand. So the demand all didn't get to transact and prices overheated. They soared. And so once mortgage rates went up 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that reality of that deterioration became apparent. And so the market we're in now is slowly active inventory is rising, completed unsold new construction is rising, and the power dynamic is moving more and more from sellers to buyers.
Let's look at this. I want you to look at this chart with me in the audience. So the year-over-year metro level changes. It's interesting because the red areas are all areas that were super duper hot for a while, right? We're seeing Florida, Texas, Phoenix. These were the areas that were sizzling just not long ago, and now they're starting to come down. Is that typical?
Yeah, it is typical with housing. Often the growth markets are the ones that get the corrections, or the deeper corrections. And so what occurred during the pandemic is those markets saw prices go up more. They had a lot of people move in, and also they have just more new construction. And so as that migration is less of it's coming in, so they have to rely more on local incomes, that's created a demand shock, a greater one there. And the builders for multifamily and single family, they have to move that product. They're going to sell it. So if they have to discount it, do big buy downs, do whatever they need to move that product, they'll do it. And so it creates a cooling effect on the resale market as existing home sellers have to compete with the builders.
So here's the thing, though. I read somewhere where there's yesterday, I think, $700 billion in homes worth, for sale. Although I kind of like, say, come on, give me a break. But maybe it's what they, it's what they would like to get for them. $700 billion. That's up over 20% from a year ago. At this pace, though, what happens? I mean, are we looking at a housing collapse?
So what we're seeing is more sellers markets becoming balanced markets, more balanced markets becoming buyers markets, and some of the places like Florida that was in a bit of a gully is now in a bit of a correction. And so we are seeing the market.
But you sound confident that it won't get worse. Like, it sounds like.
Well, there's downside risk in this market.
Okay.
Prices can fall. And this is one of those windows where there's a greater vulnerability to prices falling. It just takes demand coming down enough to where that can manifest.
So, big business, there was a big hue and cry. I think I was among them. I was among them about Wall Street buying up all the houses during the housing boom. A lot of times people were in bidding wars with Wall Street corporations or these large entities like Innovation Homes or Progressive Residential, and felt unfair, right? Someone bid $250,000 on their dream home, and someone on Wall Street bid $300,000. Now some are saying maybe they can come to the rescue and sop up some of this excess that we have. What's the role of these large institutions and these large big businesses that buy homes?
So we saw an influx of institutional capital into single-family acquisitions during the pandemic housing boom. A lot of easy money rolling around, prices are soaring, rents are soaring. They chased it. And so they became 2% of the market at that time. That's pulled way back to where it's now a third of 1%. They're not buying much, and they haven't been buying much since the second half of 2022. They don't like the returns they can find in the market. Some of them are a little worried about some of the downside risks.
A lot of people are saying, they bought all the mobile homes, they jacked up rents. They bought all the cheap, low-hanging fruit homes, starter homes that a young family may otherwise have bought. They bought it and they jacked up the rents, and that prohibits a lot of young people from ever achieving the American dream.
I think they're downstream of what the overall reason was. There was so much money that came into the economy. Right. Ultra low rates, capital markets are humming, and it had to go find returns. And so I think maybe at a margin, maybe they played a role, right, but they're a part of a bigger movement of what happened during the pandemic.
So real quick, I got less than 30 seconds. The Federal Reserve being criticized, rates are far too high. Should the Federal Reserve take into consideration what's happening in housing when they make their next rate decision?
Well, I think the thing with the long-term rates, like mortgage rates, sure, it's hard to say if the Fed cut some, how much that would impact the long-term rates. But if you look out at the economy right now for housing, when you account for U.S. incomes, U.S. home prices, and mortgage rates, we're at a 40-year low for affordability. And so the existing home sales market's not getting much turnover, and buyers are gaining more power the longer we've stayed in this constrained market.
All right, save your money. Your dream home may come around again. Your work is fantastic, Lance. Thanks a lot. Great seeing you.
JP Morgan Chase Chairman and CEO Jamie Dimon sat down with Maria during the 2025 Reagan National Economic Forum last week. Watch.
Thank you so much. I'm at the Reagan National Economic Forum, and I'm sitting with Jamie Dimon, Chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase. Jamie, thank you for sitting with us.
Maria, thrilled to be here.
I know we have limited time. I want to get right into it and first get your thoughts about this big, beautiful bill underway in the Senate, where you've got some pushback from some senators about spending cuts not being enough. What do you think they need to do?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I'm thrilled they got it through, and I think Michael Johnson did an unbelievable job doing that. I think the Senate, I think they should finish it. I think increasing consistency, keeping the tax rates going that allow business to invest, small business to large business, is really important for growth and et cetera. And if you go back to the bill in 2017, it brought back trillions of dollars to the United States. It created a lot of jobs. It created a lot of growth. And people, when they look at those numbers, they don't accurately say what those are. So it will work. Then they should go back and worry about cutting, literally looking at, and I shouldn't say cutting, making things more efficient around, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. It could be done, but I think they're better off just getting this thing finished as best they can. The smaller the deficit is, the better.
Are you, as a business person running the largest bank, counting on that, the extension of those tax cuts?
Not so much J.P. Morgan, but I think if you talk to small businesses who they don't know if the rate's going to be like 28% or 40%, they need it. If you talk to a lot of companies that do a lot of R&D or a lot of equipment expensing, they need the certainty. And what you really don't want them to do is just waiting to find out what's going to happen before they make investments in new plants and equipment, et cetera. And you've seen a little bit of that, so the sooner the better.
How much are you focused on debt and deficits right now?
It's a big deal. It is a real problem, but one day we're going to have the bond market's going to have a tough time. I don't know if it's 6 months or 6 years. So I think we have to focus on it. But when you say focus on it, the real focus should be growth, pro-business, proper deregulation, permitting reform, getting rid of blue tape, getting skills in schools, get that growth going. That's the best way. And then reform some of these programs. Everyone knows can be reformed properly. And I think some of the reform can take place. We're not taking benefits out of poor people or sick people, or old people. You're just putting rules in place that make it more reasonable, less fraud, less waste, less abuse. So I think all those things need to be done. And then we can conquer that problem.
We've already seen a reaction in the bond market. Rates have been spiking. When you say something will happen in the bond market, what do you mean bond market will crack? What does that mean?
But the public has to understand is that something like $30 trillion of securities trades every day. These are investors around the world. Foreigners own $35 trillion of American securities. They have another $30 trillion of private investments in the United States or something like that in the United States. People vote with their feet. And they're going to be looking at the country, the rule of law, the inflation rates, the central bank policies, what they want to hedge and what they don't want to hedge. And so those rates aren't set by central banks. They can affect them. They can twist them. They can do things to make you feel more comfortable, which they should do. But, if people decide that the U.S. dollar isn't the place to be, yeah, you could see, spreads gap out, credit spreads gap out, and that will become a problem. We had that during COVID. The Fed properly stepped in then. We had that in 2019. We had it in 20. It will happen again. It's just I can almost guarantee you that. I just don't know exactly when or what the trigger might be.
What kind of
and the important thing about that is it's not for JP Morgan itself. It's not. It doesn't affect us that much. When you have these volatility in the markets, we trade. We're good at it. We finance companies. It hurts the people raising money, and that includes small businesses. That includes loans to small businesses. It includes high yield debt. It includes leveraged lending. It includes real estate loans. That's why you should worry about volatility in the bond markets, not because you should worry about the big banks.
What kind of growth are you looking for second half of the year?
Oh, God. I think our economists have it at like 1.5 or something like that. But I would rely on them. I don't know. I think there's so many moving parts. I just don't know how to look at something like that.
I mean, Kevin Hassett was on this show the other day, and he said he would not be surprised to see 4% growth in the second half of the year.
I disagree with Kevin.
You disagree? I mean,
I hope he's right. I just don't know.
Speaking of growth, look at the growth at JPM. The other day, the investor day, you had all your shareholders happy with the goals that you set out and your most recent quarter. What do you make, like $1 billion a week?
Close, yeah. but remember, but all that stuff we do has been investing. It's been taking place for 15 years.
That's earnings.
New branches, new bankers, new technologies, serving clients, we serve our multinational, U.S. all around the world, and that's how you build a company. And then we, provide services, payments, and market making, and we raise capital. I think in total, like $2.5 trillion a year and that includes governments, cities, states, hospitals, schools, large corporations, small businesses, and that's our job. Profits themselves bounce around for a whole bunch of different reasons, but we like doing it, and we're quite comfortable that we can grow our company.
You've also
and we've got real competition by it. So I don't sit here, being complacent. We have the other major, investment banks and commercial banks, but we have, the fintech folks. We've got foreigners, some who are doing a very good job. So I always look at the ones who are doing better than us and why. I don't just focus on, how well we're doing.
Who's doing better than you?
Stripe has built a great business in payments. We could have done some of that. PayPal's done stuff. There's some, we have a Chase UK, we have a digital-only bank, but you've seen Revolut's done a very good job building a real digital bank, but not just one country, but, pan-European, and they're coming here. So a lot of people. I remember, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, sending a bunch of people on our airplanes from consumer retail to China, and they said, why are we going to China? We're a U.S. bank. I said, you'll find out when you get there. When we set them up with Ping An and Tencent and Alipay and Alibaba, and it opens up your eyes. People around the world are doing really interesting stuff. And you can debate what stable coins might do one day to banking. And so we're always looking at that competition of all different sorts.
What is the impact of the stablecoin legislation on the banks, on JPM?
I think we are going, first of all, we have a JP Morgan coin. I think that crypto, if you mean stablecoin, moving data, real-time payments, doing data and payments together, that stuff is real. We're going to be at the forefront of that. The JP Morgan coin today can move money and data, but as a deposit at JP Morgan. And so it's used internally. We're going to externalize it at one point. My view is we should be in that. I think the other question is, what's the laws around it, AML, BSA, KYC for other people? What's the access to the Fed? What are the rules of the Fed? The Fed may do it itself, to move money internationally. That's all reasonable. Remember, we already move $10 trillion a day, and it's digital. And we already move some of it real time. And so a lot of this, we're already building the technologies to do a better job for the client.
So why do we need digital assets?
Well, it depends what you mean by digital asset. It could be a very effective way to move money through the correspondent banking system, where everyone in that system can see where the money is, what it's for, where it is, all at the same time. So there are going to be some very good uses for blockchain.
You spend what, $20 billion on technology? You're spending more on technology than NASA.
Really?
Is that not right?
I don't know. I didn't know that.
Tell us about your allocation of money on technology and what your goals are.
It is about close to $20 trillion, and that's every business. When we look at it, so first of all, it's the big stuff that we do at the corporation. That's networks, the big data centers, certain policies, things like that. But then there's stuff, and some AI policy. We spend billions of dollars in AI already, $1 billion in cyber to protect our clients. But then we do it at the business level. If you're in small business, what are you doing with data to do a better job for your client? That could be for technology. That could be better online account opening. It could be wealth management. It could be better fraud services. It could be, hooking into accounts receivable, accounts payable systems. So it's at the very detailed level. In trading, you're talking about split-second trading, hedging taking place with AI. So for every business, they have a whole list of things that they're trying to get done to do a better job for the client. Better is faster, cheaper, ancillary services that people want you give away for free. So it's a whole wide set of stuff.
I'm glad you're talking about security and security of our money at JPM. You just got back from China.
Yeah.
You said when you were up there on stage today, you're not afraid. Tell me what your observations were in China. And I mean, didn't they just do an enormous hack?
Yeah.
Into our networks?
Yes. So cyber is a big deal. China cyber is a big deal. And we don't really know what our government does, by the way, but it's a big deal. And we spend a lot of money protecting us and our clients on cyber. What I mean by that, I'm not afraid of them, is that China, first of all, they're not afraid of us either. And going over there, you get the distinct impression that they are doing their thing. They're putting a lot of money into AI, cars, robotics. They're going to be 30 or 40% of new pharmaceuticals sometime shortly. They're going their way, but they have weaknesses. They still have a lot of poverty. They have a very tough neighborhood. A lot of their neighbors are rearming. They have to deal with us. We're still, the most prosperous economy on the planet. But my point, the thing I'm not afraid of them. I'm afraid that we don't get our own act together internally. If America just does our things right, deregulation, permitting, education, pro-business, grow the economy, help the lower income folks by growing the economy, fixing immigration, eventually allowing good immigration in, we'll be in great shape. We'll be the preeminent military and economy 30 or 40 years from now. If we're not, the world would be a very different world than what we live in today. So
what do you want to see? What should be done in terms of policy? You've been increasingly worried and talking about national security issues.
Yeah. Oh, so I say that there's like tectonic plate shifting. People looking, the world relied on the U.S. military umbrella. I think they should. You can easily say, people didn't spend enough money. We did too much of it. They relied on us too much. Or you can say we misused it sometimes. I think that's also true. But that is really important. If countries start looking elsewhere for their national security, that will become an issue. It's directly related to their economic security. So it's not just trade. Is who do you want to partner with? So we already have, alliances with 100 different countries, economic alliances, 100 different countries, but also India. Who do you want to partner with? And that includes trade, it includes investment, development finance, and it includes educating them about the values of America, which we've stopped doing a little bit, values of freedom of speech, freedom of enterprise. It allowing good immigration here. People have pointed out that 40% of the new companies were immigrants who came here to be American. They didn't come here to change America. And so if we do those things right, and then the other long list is permitting, dereg, I call it the blue state, as you know, we'll be great. We just have to get our act together.
Well, you said something that struck me earlier. We should be stockpiling. What did you say?
I said not bitcoins, but bullets, tanks, missiles. Because you pointed out national security is a critical thing. So the most important thing to me in trade is going to be protecting our own national security. And that's around resilient supply chains for medical ingredients, for anything that goes into our F-35s, rare earths, and related. Think of 2 nanocentimeter AI chips, things like that. We say, yeah, this is important for American national security. We need resilient supply chains, and then we have to do things to help the military, which is we don't keep productive capability empty. So all of us do that in our businesses, but their missile capability, they have, I forgot the number, they have a plant building missiles, but if you have the double or triple production, we don't have a plant sitting there ready to go. And we need that.
Right.
And that should have been part of our planning. We don't allow enough flexibility for the military. The world's changed. And you see what's happening to these drones. What you need is very different this month than even 2 months ago. So they need more flexibility to buy this, not buy that. We need to spend more money. We need to do budgeting, do multi-year budgeting for them. And so we're going to lay this out. We have a thing called the Defense Action Forum. We spend a lot of time with some of the generals and some of the new tech companies in equipment, and then obviously the big prime contractors. What do we need to do to have the best military? What's changed? And we got to do it now. We don't really have the luxury to wait.
Well, so when President Trump is thinking about these trade deals that he's talking about, what you're saying is put limitations on certain groups. Like it's not, bullets are not the same as T-shirts.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the other thing is it's unilateral. You don't have to negotiate. certain things are just, this is the way America's going to do it. You know, they've done that in a whole bunch of different things. This is the way we do it. There are other things which they should focus on too, which I say is unfair trade, where if you believe they're using their capital, their surplus, their economy, subsidies to dominate a global industry like cars or batteries, that's not unfair. On that one, of course you should deal with in trade, but you also need to do with their allies. It's not nearly as effective to do it for yourself. And now we don't get any of that stuff here, but the allies are going to do it anyway. Right. So they can still dominate the global industry without us actually being part of it.
Jamie, as I wrap up here, what do you want to say about leadership? I mean, you were at the Investor Day the other day, and everyone was saying, oh, he's here for another 5 years. I mean, you're not going anywhere, it doesn't seem like. But why does everybody talk about soon you're going to have to retire?
It's several, I know, it's several years away. And obviously, it's always up to God and the board. We've got some great people. There will be an appropriate time. And then I may stick around for a couple of years, you know, up to God and the board as, you know, chairman or executive chairman, something like that. I love what I do. I love my country, and I don't know what I'd do if I wasn't fighting for something every day. What
do you want to say to a young person who wants to become the next Jamie Dimon? How do they do it?
It's work and learn, read everything, talk to everybody, talk to every side. Don't become weaponized by one side or the other. Get out in the road. It's amazing. Get around the world, because certain countries are doing some fabulous stuff. Earn your respect every day with a little bit of humanity and heart. People should want to trust you. They'll work for it. They want to trust you. So leadership isn't like just pounding people. It's, you know, and you know, like if I came to Fox, you know, and I was running Fox, I don't know what everyone in Fox does every day. I know what everyone does every day in J.P. Morgan. That's why I work hard. That's why I do my bus trips, is to, and then say, we'll fix it for you. Whether the client tells me of a problem or the teller tells me of a problem, and have a little heart, humanity, treat everyone properly. You know, make sure you treat, you know, from the security guards to the waiters to, you know, to the CEO, treat them properly and enjoy your life, you know, and enjoy the journey a little bit. And it's that journey is never straight. I mean, it's a rocky thing. So
I know you a long time, Jamie, and most people may not know this, but even you got fired once.
I did. And everyone, they introduced me, they never mentioned that, you know, that I worked for 15 years for one guy, helped build Traveler. I've been president, chief operating officer, merged it with Citi. And that obviously wasn't going to work out, and I got fired. And I was surprised, you know, but eventually you dust off, you move on.
And then you came back and you crushed them in market share.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, final question here. Jamie, how do the markets feel to you right now?
Complacent. You know, prices are high, things are going okay. Prices are kind of working in a soft landing. I hope that's true. I just tell people, I think the odds of that are just lower than other people think, and that they're going to surprise. There's so many things moving out there, from deficits to geopolitics to trade. It's complex, and something can go wrong. And you know, when things do, you usually get surprised. And I was taking my job, not guessing the future, being prepared to serve my clients regardless of the future. That's how I look at business.
Jamie, it's great to see you today.
Yeah, great. Enjoy it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jamie Dimon.
I asked retired four-star General Jack Keane what the drone strike by Ukraine deep into Russia means militarily for Ukraine. Watch this.
They targeted the very bombers that have been killing Ukrainian citizens and Ukrainian soldiers. They used conventional bombs out of those bombers, as well as air-launched cruise missiles. What makes the operation so stunning is that the Ukrainians clandestinely contracted with Russian drivers, Russian trucks to do the move, purchased Russian shipping containers, and then assembled the drones in those shipping containers, all in Russia. Quite stunning, and the results are equal to the imagination that was used in this operation.
High praise indeed from a retired four-star general. Mike Baker's with us. He's a former CIA covert operations officer. I've read reports this morning that that drone attack deep inside Russia changes warfare, changes the nature of warfare. You go that far?
Well, I would say that the use of drones changes warfare, not necessarily just this operation. Look, the operation was brilliant, as the general just mentioned, on par with the Hezbollah pager operation that took place. The complexity of it, the need for human assets on the ground in a very hostile environment. Zelensky said it could have taken up to 18 months in the planning stages. And it's important from both a logistical or practical means and also from a symbolic means, right? So from a military perspective, the damage done is probably somewhere in between what Zelensky and the Ukrainian military are reporting, some 40, strategic long-range bombers hit, and some A-50s, their version of the AWACS. And it's, it's not what the Russians are downplaying, right? So as the U.S. estimates are saying, about half of what was initially reported. That is significant, because estimates have the Russians at about 80 of these long-range strategic bombers at this point. So if you take out 20 of them, my math is terrible, but I think that's about 25%.
Yeah, you take that
see,
a
look
lot.
at that. Look at that. That's why the CIA hired me, because my math abilities. But it's an incredibly impressive operation.
Yeah.
And again, from a symbolic perspective, this is probably more than anything else, more than the past attacks that they've engaged in. This has probably shook Putin more than anything.
It's fascinating to me, because in future conflicts, a country has to worry about the enemy betting people inside their country with drones that they can then knock off your own military. This really changes things. They've got the Kursk bridge now. It planted all these explosives underneath it.
Yeah, they've targeted that bridge in the past a couple of times. That's a really symbolic. The damage done in this latest attack, not quite as impressive as what was done during the aerial assaults on the strategic bombers in the various places. Look, that operation covered the entire Soviet, over Russia. Yeah. I was about to say Soviet.
That was back in your day.
How old am I?
Well, they struck in Siberia.
Yeah, they struck in Siberia. It stretched across 5 time zones, all the way to near the border with Finland, where they had another attack. Yeah. So this is all part of an effort, in a sense, to see, is there any way to drive Putin seriously to the negotiating table? Now, I don't think he has any intention of looking for an actual peace plan, Putin, I mean. And Zelensky, I think, feels the same way. Hopefully, the White House has gotten on board at this point with the fact that Putin is not someone you can really deal with. He's stringing this along.
Well, the Ukrainians have got a delegation at the White House today, no doubt for saying.
Right.
We'll tell you about it next time it happens.
Exactly.
All right, Mike, thanks for joining us.
Sure, of course. Thank you.
This morning, Beijing reportedly refuting President Trump's recent accusation that China violated last month's trade agreement, saying the president's accusations were, quote, groundless. President Trump and Xi Jinping set to speak on trade sometime this week. Joining me now, Gatestone Institute senior fellow and author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, Gordon Chang. Gordon, it's always great to have you. So they're saying, no, we didn't violate the terms of the agreement, but they clearly did. So what is happening with respect to China and Xi Jinping and their negotiating strategy right now? What are they trying to do?
Well, they're trying to delay. They want to go beyond the 90-day pause, because this is a very good deal for China. As President Trump said, he was worried about what was happening inside China, so he gave them concessions. And by the way, this gets them through the Christmas season, because this is time of Christmas for factories. The problem for us right now is that we want to talk to Xi Jinping, but Xi Jinping has lost a lot of power recently. And that means, first of all, he can't come to any sort of reasonable relationship with the United States, because that makes him look weak. But also, he very well may not have the authority to do it anymore. So really, these talks with Xi Jinping, while we may have great hope for them, I don't think they're going to produce anything of value to us.
And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth with a weekend warning about the imminent threat China poses to Taiwan.
It's public that Xi has ordered his military to be capable of invading Taiwan by 2027. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent. We hope not, but it certainly could be.
China pushing back, saying that Secretary Hegseth, quote, vilified China with defamatory allegations. I want to get your reaction to this, because we were just talking in the break, and it seems like he sort of sees his legacy, I'm talking about Xi Jinping, as a wartime president.
Yes, well, he talks about war all the time, and he is mobilizing all of Chinese society, not just the military, but civilians as well, calling up reservists, taking over civilian factories so they can turn out items for the military. This is total mobilization. And and I'm very glad that Secretary Hegseth said this, because, normally at the Shangri-La dialogue where Hegseth was, you have all of these kind and polite words from the United States. And this time, Hegseth didn't sugarcoat it at all. He really laid it out. But the important thing, Jackie, is now that he said that this could be imminent, where are the actions of the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense himself to get us ready?
Right. Well, this seems to be an ongoing discussion point, right, between China and Taiwan. Will they, won't they? There are people certainly that believe that they will. I'm in the camp that I think that's a real threat. There are others in the camp that don't think it's a threat at all. I'm with you in the sense that I'm getting the sense that you think it is a real threat.
Well, China going to war is a real threat. I mean, I don't think China would start hostilities with an invasion of the main island of Taiwan, because to do that, Xi Jinping has got to trust his military, and he doesn't at all. So, this is a point where China is going to start a war someplace. Maybe not with Taiwan, but that war will eventually envelop Taiwan, because when war starts in East Asia, it's going to spread throughout.
Right. Did you see that recent article over the weekend about China wanting to send drones via container ships to the United States, so that almost like what the Israelis did, when they blew up those pagers, right? That China's going to send these drones to the United States in these container ships and then launch the drones.
Well, it's like what Ukraine just did. Right?
Correct.
I mean, they shipped all these things in boxes. The boxes opened and the drones came out.
And so there was a big article on A, whether or not that was going to happen, and B, how would we protect ourselves?
Well, we really right now have military bases that are open to these drones. I mean, you had all of those drone incursions at Langley Air Force Base.
Right.
The Air Force just couldn't do anything about them, and that was only like 3 or 4 months ago. So, right now, we have all of our bombers parked right out in Barksdale, and the Chinese can do to us what the Ukrainians did to the Russians.
Right.
Let's get to this. Wall Street Journal is saying that Harvard University has educated so many Chinese officials. Many in the country refer to it as, quote, the top party school. Alumni include a former vice president, Xi's top trade negotiator, and even his own daughter, who graduated in 2014. Gordon, on so many fronts, we've got issues with China, and the universities just underscore that.
Yes, well, Harvard is a particularly bad actor here because, as they say, it is the party school for mid-level officials. And this means that we're not training our own people, we're not training our friends and allies, we're training an enemy. So this has got to stop. And at that commencement speech where you had that student, I mean, she laid out Xi Jinping's plan to take over and rule the world. And this was Harvard legitimizing, Chinese rule over the United States. This is absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
President Trump is pushing back.
Can I ask about the student visa thing? The idea that we have 300,000 young Chinese people in our colleges. What is your view of the risk that poses?
Well, we know that something like 13% of them commit espionage, and that's because these students are monitored, surveilled, and coerced by Chinese consular officials and Ministry of State security agents. We know what's going on, Liz, and we've allowed this to continue decade in and decade out. And also, they have the Chinese Students and Scholars Association. These monitor Chinese students. We allow these chapters in our country. We should ban this immediately.
So would you agree with banning all these Chinese, the visas for these Chinese students coming here?
I don't think we should do that. But if we do that, it's a drastic action. We absolutely have to do something. And if that's the only thing that works, then we got to do it.
Well, vetting is certainly part of the process. And the president is saying we need to vet people more thoroughly. Gordon, before we let you go, I just want to ask you about South Korea, because the voters are heading to the polls there tomorrow for their presidential election. And the leader of the Progressive Democratic Party of South Korea is said to be the front runner who has publicly pushed for closer ties with China. So how does that factor in?
Well, it's not only closer ties with China. He really is very close to China, very close to North Korea, and absolutely abhors the United States. This is going to be a very tough 5 years. We've dealt with leftist presidents in South Korea before, but this guy, Lee Jae-myung, he is so much more ruthless. He's more determined. He's much more effective. He actually paralyzed the South Korean government in opposition. So as president, he could do some really damaging things.
Gordon Chang, thank you. Good to see you this morning. Appreciate it. TikTok, the Trump administration has set the clock. According to reports, President Trump is demanding U.S. trading partners submit their best offers by tomorrow, with the July 8th tariff deadline looming. It's a global game of economic chicken, and the White House says it's done waiting. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Big Money Show. I'm Jackie DeAngelis. With me are my co-hosts, Taylor Riggs, Jerry Willis, in for Dave McDowell, Brian Bremberg, and with us for the entire hour, Prairie Operating Company EVP of Market Strategy, Lou Bassanese. So let's get back to this. Lower tariffs, fairer quotas, and real enforcement on everything from digital trade to critical minerals. Those are the demands coming from Washington. And Trump is turning up the pressure himself, writing this on Truth Social. If other countries are allowed to use tariffs against us and we're not allowed to counter them, our country doesn't even have a small chance of economic survival. Sources say deals with allies like India might be within our reach, but for others, especially in Europe and Asia, we could be shaping up for quite a showdown. So I have gone through this, Lou Bassanese, and I've said that list of tariffs he was holding right there was not really a real list, that this was all about negotiation. When the UK deal came in, I was optimistic. When China pause came in, I thought, okay, things are going well. When he said we're having trouble with the EU, I said, Houston, we have a problem. And this signifies to me that there is a bigger problem.
I do. I think you said it rightly. It's a game of chicken, and he's really having to take a stronger stance. But I got to give you credit. Long ago, when he was awaiting inauguration, you said he's carrying a big stick with tariff talk. And I think we're seeing that again. And countries need to wake up. I mean, it's a July 8th deadline, and we're here. It's June 3rd, right? So he knows he needs to get the ball moving in the right direction, shift momentum. Because I'm with you. China seemed like a great deal. This seemed like momentum was happening, and now it's slowing down. EU, understandably, is going to be hard. You're talking with 27 different countries. Someone is going to feel like they're being neglected in that. But time is of the essence. I think the president is right to push the issue, force it now, and use all means possible. I mean, who would have thought social media could have such an influence on international affairs and economic policy?
Yeah, I get what he's trying to do here, but I also am of the school that ultimatums sometimes can really backfire in your face. You have to be careful. Taylor, when we're looking at the countries that are the most difficult to negotiate with, I would probably say China and the EU top the list. So you're looking at some of that.
So this is very interesting, you guys. We've talked a lot about who needs who more. Does China need the U.S. more? Do they fold first? Do they blink first in this game of chicken? We got China private sector manufacturing numbers out overnight, and lo and behold, they slide into contractionary territory from expansion territory. Gauge for new export orders in China drops to the lowest level since July of 23. Employment declines, prices low as supply and demand weakens. Here's another quote from manufacturers in China. Unfavorable factors affecting China's economic development remain prevalent. External trade environment uncertainty has increased. Downward pressure on the economy has intensified relative to recent periods. And then lo and behold, what Morgan Stanley, our favorite U.S. bank, Brian, by some measures, has to say about the U.S. economy. To our surprise, U.S. manufacturing construction starts up in the first quarter. My chart of the day shows that U.S. manufacturing construction tracking 250% higher relative to 2019 levels. So again, one note, one data point. But I come out this morning and I'm thinking, wow, it looks pretty negative for China, and I'm only reading positive stuff. There's another volatile level of GDP that we don't talk about because it's so volatile, but it's showing very high growth so far in the second quarter for the U.S. So again, in the game of chicken, who needs who more?
Well, I think the data points keep piling up, though. I did the math, and China would suffer a 2.2% drag on GDP if they don't resolve things with the U.S. Now, we're talking about they're trying to maintain 5%, basically cutting it in half. They need us way more, as you're citing. The U.S. economy is reaccelerating.
Yeah, you don't want the factories there to slow. We've already seen rumblings of the natives getting restless as a result of this back and forth. But the Truth Social post coming from Donald Trump is quite intriguing to me because he makes an interesting point. Other countries are using tariffs on us, yet we're limited here in the United States. He's been challenged in the court system of whether or not he can use emergency powers, Brian, in order to enact the tariffs that he wants to. Obviously, you've highlighted there are several tariff tools that he has in the toolbox he can use, but they're not as extensive as he would like them to be. And so we do have to ask ourselves, are our rules to a certain degree limiting?
Well, he's got more power on tariffs than any president in the history of this country. I mean, the grand sweep of tariffs in America has been Congress giving more of that power to the executive. So he's in a pretty good spot. Now, Donald Trump always takes everything he can get. He's not, he doesn't take the Brenberg approach, which is, man, I've still got a lot of other things I could do, right? He takes the Trump approach, which is, I want everything. He wants 301, 232, whatever the one Dagan said yesterday was. He wants IEEPA. He wants it all. Okay. I think he's in a good spot. I'm a little more positive on the ultimatum than you. I get it. The ultimatums I give to my kids backfire often.
Generally not good, right?
I can second that.
Donald Trump is better at ultimatums than I am. And I think he's going to these countries and he's saying, let's get this moving on Trump time. You're now on Trump time. You've sat around and thought about it. You've sort of tested where the wind is blowing. Let's make a deal. Give me your best offer. We'll tell you if it's good enough.
Yeah.
But I like that. This is a good time. If you're right, and China always lies about their numbers, but if they're telling you manufacturing soft, then it's bad.
Yeah.
Okay? In the U.S., we keep getting these surprising numbers like, oh my gosh, unemployment's good. Oh my gosh, inflation's good. Oh my gosh, manufacturing's come back. It's a good time for the U.S. to use that leverage and get something done. So I like what he's doing with this.
But can I say just one thing here? It's not just China and the EU and other countries. It's also the stock market and investors who play a role in how fast this has to go. And it's going to be interesting to see, I think, just how patient the market will be going forward, because I think they're going to want this wrapped up. You know how the market is. It's like, okay, are we done yet? Can we move on? Earnings are out. Okay, bye. You know, they want it fast. They want it done.
Do you think they're kind of done, though? I mean, we got that. You were talking about the EU thing on Friday, right? Like Houston, we have a problem. And the market was, you know, dropped for a bit. And
no, so I think
we're just back.
I think the market's been pretty good about this, to be perfectly honest with you. Now that the initial gut punch, the shock has worn off, and they know Trump is in a Trump
speed.
Trump speed kind of negotiation right now. They're taking it on the chin here. I think the rest of the data has been pretty encouraging, and so have earnings. And so the market is saying, you know, it looks at the neighbors. Taylor, you point out those that we're negotiating with and the positions that they're in, and is saying this is still the best house in, you know, a crummy neighborhood right now.
They continue to analyze it that way. And they give them some.
It's the data keeps coming in. I mean, if we look at earnings, right, analysts got really negative and only expected 6% growth. They came in at 12.9% for the quarter. So like Brian was saying, all these reports keep coming in unexpectedly positive or more positive than we thought originally. And the stage is set for that to continue. I mean, we're seeing companies that are absorbing the tariff pressure, sacrificing some margins. They're still seeing demand. Retail reporting, we were talking about this last week. The retailers came out without an exception almost, maybe Walmart, the only one, really strong reports that the consumer is there. So.
You also have the prospect of the big, beautiful bill and tax cuts passing, and I think that's holding this market up well as well, because it's optimistic that the plan, all the spokes in the wheel are finally coming together, and this is what he promised. We're going to be talking later in the show about the consumer. We're going to be talking later in the show about some of the new energy projects, all these different things that have to come together to float this economy. But right now, even despite the fact that we're in a negotiation, so far so good.
You talked about earnings growth. My estimates had 13.1%.
The official Taylor Riggs estimate,
0.2% higher than you, but I'm Pollyanna, so maybe we'll attribute it to that. That's not relative to revisions. That is literally earnings growth year over year, taking all the revisions out of it. I mean, that is solid and healthy. And as long as that grows above the long-term median, which is about 7%, valuations price higher goes up 90% of the time and by 9% on average. Not saying everything is in the clear and we're all going higher, but the fundamentals so far have held up phenomenally well.
And that's really important, because if you have fundamentals like that you're building on, and they want to get the growth engine going, that's what's going to pay for the tax cuts and the big, beautiful bill, or at least the part that the spending cuts don't pay for. You've got a good case to make that growth is going to be higher than a lot of the estimates out there. That's what I think is being priced in right now.
I hear a really strong case to not freak out about tariffs. Like, that is my day by day lesson in this is I don't think businesses are freaking out as much as the financial press. I don't think investors are freaking out the way everybody thought they were going to. I know that there's some news outlets that would love to see all of this fall apart, but I don't think most of America wants to see it fall apart, and that's why it's not falling apart.
So is it not freak out about the tariffs because it's all going to turn out well, or is it don't freak out about the tariffs because ultimately nothing's going to happen?
I would say both. I'd say two reasons. One is I don't think tariffs are going to have as much impact on our overall economy as people say they are. I mean, 80% of our economy is a domestic economy, okay? I think that's one of them. I think the other one is President Trump doesn't want to destroy the American economy. He doesn't want to destroy American capital. He wants to see it win in the globe. And so I think he's going to ultimately do things that benefit growth and prosperity in the country. And if you believe those two, if you recognize the first thing, that our economy is very domestic in a lot of ways, and if you believe the second, which is you've got a president who loves economic growth, I think you're going to be okay.
And if he comes to the 10% baseline that we've been saying the market's probably expecting, and most people are expecting now, he generates some tariff revenue, which is something that he wanted to do. And when you cobble that all together, all those savings, $200 billion here, $175 billion with Doge, you've got his gold card initiative that's coming out. You start adding up those numbers, and they actually are pretty impactful, especially on the Doge side when you're cutting a lot of waste. So I think that he reaches his objective. He had to go hard and high when he started to be able to get the conversation going.
Yeah, and don't lose sight of the fact that, Brian's point, we have a domestic economy largely, and tariffs only impact goods, right? And personal consumption, 2/3 of that spending is on services. So we're talking about tariffs impacting 1/3 of consumer spending, not the entire thing.
Right.
So it's really a smaller impact than most people or most news outlets have tried to make it out to be.
Absolutely. Meantime, we're looking at stocks today. And Taylor, you're watching Signet.
You guys, how can we not do this one, right? All the jewelry makers like Signet up 10%. Remember, Signet owns Kay, Jared, and Zales. And there is a new fad out there on lab-grown diamonds. Man-made diamonds, not a cubic zirconium, that literally the biology of the diamond is the same as an earth-made one, but you just grow it in a lab, but it's like a fraction of the cost. So Signet Jewelers is saying that they're adding more lab-grown diamonds to their fashion jewelry assortment, because if you don't want to buy a real engagement ring, you could buy a lab-grown diamond, but if you want something higher than just fashion jewelry of like a cubic zirconium, lab-grown diamonds are double the price of that, which is helping them, and higher gold prices are helping them. So lab-grown diamonds is this very interesting sort of middle-of-the-road niche that they're really tapping into.
Yeah,
You're nodding.
No, I'm nodding because there used to be another company that was trying to forge their way in this market. It was in between cubic zirconia and lab grown, and about 5-6 years ago, it was a small cap company that just couldn't get traction. It's funny how consumer taste adjusts, and now it's okay. You're saving 30 to 40% on average off a typical diamond. You get more bling for your buck. I think
and
that is.
But it's lower
you
end.
cannot tell the difference.
You're talking about Kay Jewelers and Zales. De Beers just said they're not going to be producing any more lab-grown diamonds. Higher end.
Tiffany's won't
doesn't want
either.
to be,
But
really?
associated with it.
There's definitely a certain market for it, and it's hard with lab-grown diamonds. There isn't a resale value. You don't know what. If I wanted to trade up, what is that market?
Why would someone buy your used lab-grown diamond when they could go buy a new lab-grown
Brian
diamond?
and I are really into this stuff.
Well, the main problem with lab-grown diamonds is the name lab-grown diamond.
You're thinking lab-grown
It's the
meat?
but. The biology is the same, but.
Yeah.
They need a better name, though. It can't be lab-grown.
Fake would be worse.
Man-made.
That doesn't do it for me. Keep working on it. Get back to me on
No
that. We need a
blood
better
diamond.
name.
Biologically engineered. Like GMOs.
Like your food.
Which we
I don't
love.
know. I don't think
All right,
that's
coming up.
Elon Musk is brilliant. He built the Tesla, SpaceX, XAI, Neuralink empire, but he should grow up. His tantrum Thursday was embarrassing and damaging. It's got to stop. Fortunately, there are early signs of a truce. Quite simply, Musk is way out of line. He's been personally insulting to the president and politically damaging. The whole sorry episode exploded Thursday afternoon and went on into the night. In the middle of the fight, billionaire investor Bill Ackman stepped in and posted this on X. I support Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and they should make peace for the benefit of our great country. A few hours later, Musk replied, "You're not wrong." Now, that sounds conciliatory, doesn't it? And this morning, there was a report that a phone call would happen between Trump and Musk, but our sources now say Trump has no intention of speaking with Musk today. The Democrats, well, they're having a field day. The public feud has made them almost giddy. The late-night so-called comedians had a grand old time, and the media are delighted to see the two men they hate most go at it in public. Okay, just hold on a minute, please. They may be having fun with the insults, but think this through. This may be good for Trump's big, beautiful bill. Republicans are rallying around Trump, not Musk. Elon was never that popular with politicians. He trod on their toes. It's hard to see the United States Senate killing the bill because Musk doesn't like it. Some more spending cuts may be added, and that makes passage of the bill more likely. The bottom line for the market and the economy is this: pass the bill, cut taxes, grow the economy. That's what Trump was elected for. Hard to see the Republican Party siding with a tantrum-prone, mega-rich genius who was elected by nobody.